A tourist vanishes on a paradise island, and no one looks for her. A beach so beautiful it's been abandoned by every government on Earth. An island that appears on maps, but officially doesn't exist. Today, we're exploring 40 mind-blowing facts about Caribbean islands that will change how you see our world. Fact 1. Here's something that shouldn't exist in 2025. On the island of Hispaniola, one border divides two completely different worlds. Cross from Haiti into the Dominican Republic, and the landscape changes instantly. On one side, deforested brown hillsides. On the other, dense green forest. The same island, two realities, visible from space. Fact 2. Imagine a beach that actually eats ships. On the southwest coast of Barbados, a phenomenon called the ship graveyard current has claimed dozens of vessels over 4 centuries. The water looks calm, almost inviting, but a hidden rip current accelerates to 9 knots without warning. Sailors call it the Smiler because you never see it coming. Fact 3. What if I told you there's an island where it rains almost every single day of the year? Dominica, not the Dominican Republic, but tiny Dominica, receives over 350 inches of rainfall annually in its interior. That's more than almost anywhere else on the entire planet. Its rainforest is so dense that parts of it have never been mapped on foot. Fact 4. Here's something that shouldn't be possible. The island of Saba rises almost vertically from the sea, 2,877 feet of near sheer volcanic rock. For 350 years, experts said it was impossible to build a runway there. In 1963, a local man named Remy de Haenen built one anyway. It remains the shortest commercial runway in the entire world. One wrong calculation, and you're in the Caribbean Sea. Fact 5. Every year, this island loses about 3 feet of coastline. Barbuda, the sister island of Antigua, has been quietly eroding for decades. But after Hurricane Irma in 2017, the entire population of nearly 1,800 people was evacuated. Every single person. For the first time in 300 years, Barbuda had 0 permanent residents. The island was left completely alone, but that was just the beginning. Fact 6. Imagine a lake that turns you into stone. On the island of Trinidad, there exists Pitch Lake, the largest natural deposit of asphalt in the world. It covers 100 acres and goes 250 feet deep. In 1994, perfectly preserved prehistoric animals were found inside it. Locals have been walking on it for generations. Some areas feel solid, others will swallow you in seconds. Fact 7. Here's something that changes the map twice a year. Between Haiti and Cuba lies a tiny sandbar called Navassa Island. The United States claims it. Haiti claims it. Both have laws on the books right now. It sits in one of the most strategically important shipping lanes in the Western Hemisphere, and it has no permanent residents, just an unmanned lighthouse and a dispute that's never been resolved. Fact 8. What if I told you an island erupted and created an entirely new island next to it? In 1995, Montserrat's Soufriere Hills volcano woke up after 400 years of silence. By 1997, the capital city of Plymouth, home to thousands, was buried under pyroclastic flow. It's still there today, under the ash, abandoned, silent. Plymouth is one of the only buried capital cities still technically recognized on official maps. Fact 9. Here's something that shouldn't exist in a tourist brochure. The waters around the Turks and Caicos Islands are stunningly clear, visibility up to 200 feet. But beneath that crystal surface runs a network of underwater caves called blue holes. Some of these holes descend over 600 feet straight down. Divers have found human remains inside them. Nobody knows how they got there. Fact 10. Every year, this Caribbean island experiences an event called the Night of the Crabs. On Christmas Island's Caribbean equivalent, Tobago, land crabs migrate in the millions to the sea. Roads are closed, cars are crushed, the ground moves. Locals call it beautiful. Tourists call it terrifying. Both are right. The Caribbean isn't what the postcards promised. Fact 11. Here's something that changes everything you think you know about islands. Cuba is bigger than all other Caribbean islands combined. Its eastern tip is only 90 miles from Florida, but politically, it might as well be another planet. The island has 2 currencies, 2 economies, and 2 completely different experiences. One for locals, one for tourists, never overlapping. Fact 12. Imagine a country where the capital city can only be reached by sea. Basse-Terre in Guadeloupe sits cut off from most of the island by mountainous jungle. There are no roads that function year-round through its volcanic interior. The city is technically accessible, but a Category 3 hurricane closes it off completely. Fact 13. Here's something that shouldn't be legal anywhere. In the early 2000s, a private company purchased an entire Bahamian island called Norman's Key. Before them, in the 1970s and 80s, Colombian drug lord Carlos Lader used it as a cocaine airstrip. Tons of cocaine, dozens of flights per week, armed guards keeping Bahamian officials away. The US DEA knew about it for years before they acted. One island, completely outside the law. Fact 14. What if I told you a river in the Caribbean flows in two directions at once? In Puerto Rico, the Rio Camuy disappears underground and becomes one of the largest cave river systems in the Western Hemisphere. It resurfaces miles later, flowing in the opposite direction from where it began. The underground section is so vast, only 10% of it has been explored by scientists. The rest remains completely unknown. Fact 15. Every year, this island experiences a fog so thick, ships have been stranded for days. The waters around Trinidad and Tobago experience a phenomenon called the chocolate water line. Where the fresh water from Venezuela's Orinoco River meets the Caribbean Sea, a visible brown line cuts across the ocean. This mixing zone creates currents that confuse compasses. 5 boats have vanished in it in the last decade. No debris, no wreckage, nothing. That was only halfway. It gets stranger. Fact 16. Here's something that shouldn't be possible on a tropical island. In the mountains of Jamaica, the temperature regularly drops below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The Blue Mountains receive frost. Coffee farmers there wear winter coats. It is the only mountain range in the Caribbean where you can genuinely get hypothermia. Most visitors never know this version of Jamaica exists. Fact 17. Imagine a country that controls waters it can't even see. France still owns Martinique and Guadeloupe, full French departments in the Caribbean. That means the European Union has a legal border in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. EU law applies. EU customs apply. The euro is the currency. You can fly from Paris to Martinique and technically never leave France. It changes the entire geopolitics of the region. Fact 18. Here's something that only happens once every few decades. When the volcanic island of Kikumjeni, 8 kilometers north of Grenada, becomes active, it creates dead zones in the water. Carbon dioxide bubbles from the seafloor in concentrations that can suffocate a swimmer. Ships are banned from a 1.5-kilometer exclusion zone. In 2015, it surged to orange alert. Most people have never heard its name. It's an underwater volcano, right now, still active. Fact 19. What if I told you there's a town in the Caribbean with streets paved in imported European cobblestone? In Old San Juan, Puerto Rico, the streets are literally paved with blue-gray ballast stone shipped from Spain in the 1500s. When Spanish ships arrived loaded with stone, they'd offload it to take on New World goods. These cobblestones are now considered a UNESCO preservation priority. Walk on them today, and you're standing on ships that sailed 500 years ago. Fact 20. Major shock moment. Here's the fact that changes everything. The entire island of Montserrat, active volcano, buried capital and all, still has around 5,000 people living on it. They live in the northern safe zone, overlooked by the volcano that destroyed their island in 1997. They watch the southern exclusion zone, still sealed off, still ash-covered, still steaming, from their windows. Scientists say another major eruption is not a question of if, it is a question of when. And they stay, because it's home. Fact 21. Here's something that changes how you see colonialism on a map. The Caribbean has more dependent territories than any other region in the world. Britain, France, the Netherlands, and the United States all still control islands here. There are more non-independent islands in the Caribbean than fully independent ones. The map of free countries in this region is smaller than most people think. Fact 22. Imagine a coral reef dying in real time, and it's visible from space. The Mesoamerican Barrier Reef stretches along the coast of Belize, Mexico, and Honduras. It's the second largest reef system in the world, but since the 1980s, it has lost over 80% of its coral cover. Scientists estimate that within 20 years, large sections will be completely bleached. Once gone, the coastline protection it provides disappears too, putting millions of people at risk of storm surge. Fact 23. Here's something that sounds like fiction, but is government documented. Haiti sits on 3 tectonic fault lines simultaneously. The Enriquillo Plantain Garden Fault, the Septentrional Fault, and a third unnamed microfault beneath Port-au-Prince. The 2010 earthquake, which killed over 200,000 people, was only a 7.0. Scientists believe the faults have stored enough energy for something significantly larger, and the rebuilding has stalled. Millions still live in vulnerable structures. Fact 24. What if I told you the most dangerous drug corridor in the Western Hemisphere runs through crystal blue Caribbean water? Between Jamaica, Haiti, Honduras, and the Dominican Republic lies what law enforcement agencies call the Blue Highway. Hundreds of tons of cocaine move through this water route every year. It funds militias, destabilizes governments, and has turned some Caribbean islands into narco-states. The water looks paradise blue. The network beneath it is anything but. Fact 25. Every year, an invisible cloud kills Caribbean coral and changes the weather. The Saharan dust plume, a massive wall of dust from Africa, crosses the Atlantic each summer. It suppresses hurricane formation on one hand, but it also smothers Caribbean coral reefs, blocking sunlight and depositing iron-rich particles. In 2020, NASA tracked a Godzilla dust plume, the largest in recorded history. It crossed 5,000 miles. It turned Caribbean skies orange, and it blocked 75% of UV radiation. Africa's desert was breathing on the Caribbean. And the geography only gets more extreme from here. Fact 26. Here's something that shouldn't be possible in a hurricane zone. The Netherlands Antilles island of Curaçao sits completely outside the Atlantic hurricane belt. It's 40 miles north of Venezuela, so far south that major storms almost never reach it. In recorded history, no major hurricane has ever made direct landfall on Curaçao. For 500 years, this was the most valuable strategic island in the Caribbean, precisely because of that weather immunity. Every empire wanted it. The Dutch still have it. Fact 27. Imagine a border where the same street is two different countries. On the island of St. Martin, the French side and the Dutch side share a single island, with no walls, no fences, and no border guards. It is the smallest landmass in the world, divided between two sovereign nations. On one side, French law, euros, baguettes. On the other, Dutch law, guilders. Different rules entirely. Cross the street, change countries. Fact 28. Here's something that only exists in the Caribbean and nowhere else on Earth. The boiling lake on Dominica is exactly what it sounds like. A flooded fumarole, a crack in the Earth's crust, constantly bubbles and steams. It's the second largest boiling lake in the world. In 2004, it briefly disappeared entirely when an underground vent shifted. Hikers arrived to find a dry, smoking crater where the water had been. 3 months later, it returned. Fact 29. What if I told you a Caribbean island was actively being claimed by an entirely different continent? Venezuela has officially claimed Isla de Aves, a tiny, half-submerged reef island, as sovereign territory. Other Caribbean nations dispute this claim, arguing the island doesn't meet the UN standard for an inhabited landmass. But Venezuela maintains a rotating military presence there anyway. Why does it matter? Because whoever owns that rock controls 200 nautical miles of exclusive economic zone, including vast potential oil and gas reserves beneath the ocean. A sandbar, worth billions. Fact 30. Second escalation spike. Here's the fact most geography books don't include. The Caribbean seafloor contains the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean. The Puerto Rico Trench drops to 28,374 feet, nearly as deep as Everest is tall. The water pressure at the bottom is 8 tons per square inch. But here's what makes this terrifying. The trench sits directly adjacent to one of the most earthquake-prone zones in the Americas. A major seismic event along the trench could trigger a tsunami capable of hitting Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and the U.S. East Coast within minutes. FEMA has run the simulation. The results have never been fully published. Fact 31. Here's something that makes cartographers argue to this day. The island of Trinidad was once physically connected to South America. Not metaphorically, literally. 17,000 years ago, when sea levels were lower, you could walk from Venezuela to Port of Spain. The separation happened after the last ice age, as glaciers melted and seas rose. Trinidad is geologically South American, biologically South American, culturally Caribbean. It is a continent that became an island while no one was watching. Fact 32. Imagine a bioluminescent bay so bright it's visible from orbit. Mosquito Bay in Vieques, Puerto Rico, glows electric blue because it contains the highest concentration of bioluminescent dinoflagellates ever recorded, up to 720,000 per gallon. When the water moves, they flash blue light, leaving glowing trails behind boats and paddles, one of the rarest natural phenomena on Earth. Fact 33. In 2023, the Dominican Republic recorded several mysterious tourist deaths in hotels and resorts. Some occurred in rooms, pools, and bars, with toxicology reports remaining inconclusive. The State Department issued warnings, while officials denied any pattern. Tourism continued, but the incidents raised international concern. Fact 34. Mount Pelée in Martinique creates its own localized cloud systems. In 1902, it erupted with a pyroclastic surge that killed 29,000 people and destroyed the city of Saint-Pierre in minutes. Only one man survived in a stone jail cell. The volcano still smokes today. Fact 35. The Caribbean hosts intelligence listening posts operated by the US, UK, and the Netherlands. Locations such as Puerto Rico, the Cayman Islands, and Aruba monitor drug routes, shipping traffic, and regional communications. The region is not only a tourist destination, it's also heavily monitored. Fact 36. By 2100, sea level rise could submerge up to 40% of the Bahamas. Some of its 700 islands may disappear completely, forcing future relocation and raising questions about what happens when a country begins losing its land. Fact 37. In 1983, the United States invaded Grenada during Operation Urgent Fury. Officially, it was to protect American students and restore democracy, but the strategic concern was a Cuban-built runway capable of handling Soviet aircraft. The conflict lasted 4 days. Fact 38. The Caribbean Sea is divided by exclusive economic zones, invisible ocean borders that control rights to oil, gas, fisheries, and deep-sea minerals. Many Caribbean nations have not fully surveyed their zones, leaving valuable resources still unclaimed. Fact 39. Urgent natural disaster gravity. La Soufriere volcano on St. Vincent erupted in April 2021, forcing 110,000 people to evacuate in 2 days. Ash reached 20 miles high and devastated agriculture and water supplies. Recovery may take decades. Fact 40. The Caribbean sits where 4 tectonic plates meet: the North American, South American, Cocos, and Caribbean plates. In 1692, a massive earthquake sank much of Port Royal, Jamaica into the sea within minutes. The submerged city still lies beneath Kingston Harbor today. The Caribbean has always been two things at once: a place of extraordinary beauty and extraordinary power. The water that holds the world's deepest trench, the islands that sit above its most unstable ground, the paradise that is simultaneously sinking, erupting, watching, and being watched. Geography doesn't care about postcards. These islands are alive, and they will outlast every resort, every border wall, every empire that ever claimed them. The Earth doesn't negotiate. It just moves.